to share how I was able to change my perspective of my husband, who I grew to hate. I found him unbelievably unattractive. I did not like the person he was. I questioned everything, like, why did I marry this guy? Why did I choose this guy to be my husband for life? And a lot of people ask me my story and our story of why we do Marriage 365. And I wanted to share how I was able to change my perspective of my husband. And maybe it will give you hope, next steps, direction. It's amazing what can happen when you do what I'm going to share of what I did. A couple things. Once I got married, I saw my husband in a different light, a very dark light. There were things that I ignored when we were dating that came to the surface when we were married pretty quickly. There were things that I actually didn't even know were there when we were dating, even though we dated a couple years. And they came out. Like, Casey was never an angry person when we were dating, like, ever. And then all of a sudden this angry guy came out of like nowhere. And I'm like, who is this guy? It's almost like you feel like Jekyll and Hyde, a little like bait and switch. You're like, is that really you? Or was this really you? Like, who's the real you? He was emotionally lazy. He was an avoider. He had so much childhood baggage that he carried into our marriage that, again, that was a big one. I didn't realize how much was there. He was insecure. I felt like he was very selfish. He has ADHD. He was diagnosed. That one I knew about, but I think I minimized it and made excuses for it. He was very defensive, very loud. He didn't have healthy communication skills. Okay, so if you're like, wow, this lady's just like bad-mouthing her husband, hang with me for a minute, okay? But I'm just being completely honest. This is part of my story. It's a sad part of my story, where you marry someone because of good intentions of being in love and wanting to live a happily ever after with someone. And then like the onion layers start to peel off and you're like, ooh, that's stinky. And ooh, I don't like that about that person. And so all that to say, I genuinely hated who he was. I hated who he had become. And I was really mad at myself for choosing this person to be my husband for the rest of my life. I was just I'm very hard on myself. And I'm like, Megan, you really dropped the ball here. This was a huge mistake that you made. And what were you thinking? So, as most people experience those kinds of situations, what do you go to? You go to divorce, right? Like, divorce must be the option. I've tried to talk to him, but he can't communicate. And I've tried to explain my feelings, but he gets defensive. Okay, have you ever been there? Anyone listening? Okay. If you're in the same boat as me, definitely make sure you pay attention to this. So I thought divorce was the only option. Thankfully, I have an amazing friend who said, that's a pretty big decision. And before you make that huge decision that's going to change the rest of your life, maybe you should go talk to somebody about that who knows what they're doing. So I went to go see a therapist. Now, my therapist at the time, she specialized in actually dealing with individual spouses. So she actually rarely worked with a couple, which looking back was exactly what I needed. She was very big into individual growth and she's like not an advocate actually for couples therapy. She's retired. It's okay. I can say that. And I found that kind of like great actually when I was researching. And again, she was recommended by somebody. So that's a really big thing, by the way. Ideally, you get a recommendation for a therapist so you don't waste your money. So I sat there and for like 30 minutes, probably longer, I don't know, I just told her my laundry list of everything my husband did wrong. Like I just shared with all of you. He's loud. He doesn't communicate. He's defensive. He's insecure. He's prideful. He has ADHD. I gave her the list. I shared stories, right? And she's sitting there writing and whatever. And she stopped and she said, okay, so I could see why he's not here in therapy. Like it's evident that he doesn't think that he's the problem. He thinks probably that you're the problem. Is that accurate, Megan? I'm like, yeah, that's accurate. Okay, so why don't you share with me about what you do wrong in marriage? And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, well, there's no way you're perfect, right? I'm like, well, yeah. No, I've got my issues. Okay, why don't you share with me some of your issues that you're aware of? Okay, so now I had to be accountable for myself, right? So I started sharing some things that I, wanted to, I knew, well, when he's defensive, my response isn't great. And, he triggers me. So I need to work on like my triggers, but like, I wouldn't be triggered if he didn't trigger me. So everything still kind of went to like, I'm only this way because of him. And so after she let me go just for a little bit, I shared a story that my husband, Casey, always thinks I'm controlling. And I was like, he tells me I'm controlling. And, like, I don't think I'm that controlling, but he tells me I am. And she's like, well, do you think you're controlling? I'm like, well, I mean, sometimes. Oh, so you are actually controlling sometimes. So sometimes he's right. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes he's right. And she's like, okay, is there anything else he could be right about? And as we got to talking, and she was a wonderful therapist, she really challenged me this one thing. She said, if you want to make a better marriage, it starts by making a better you. And while your husband's not here in my office wanting to learn and grow, you are, I hope, you seem like you are. And I can actually change your perspective of your husband, but you have to trust me in the process. And she's like, do you trust me? I'm like, I want to trust you. And she's like, let's do it. I'm going to show you and teach you how to be a healthy person, a healthy communicator, a healthy wife, no matter what happens in your marriage. And that was a really big challenge to me because I felt so stuck in my marriage because my husband wouldn't go to therapy. My husband is defensive. My husband was lazy, emotionally lazy, right? I'm like, how do you fix a marriage when it's one person? And she opened my eyes and enlightened me that actually that's what usually happens in marriage, if you did not know. Rarely do two people willingly go to therapy or willing to do Marriage 365 or whatever outsource resource they use and are like both all in. Very rarely. I'm talking less than 20%. And that's why she said, I specialize in individual spouses because most of the time, that's who's reaching out. It's one spouse who really is all in. And I can work with the all-in spouse. I can't force someone to work on their marriage who doesn't want to work on their marriage. And so for 13 months, I worked on myself. And I'm going to share just a quick story about me being controlling because this is really important for those of you who are married to someone who's controlling or you struggle with control. Hear me out on this. So I finally figured out that I was controlling. So my husband for 3 years had said, you're controlling, you're controlling. And in my mind, you guys, I would have sworn to you, I was not controlling. Like maybe sometimes, every once in a while. And through therapy and through self-awareness and some things she brought me through, I realized I actually am very controlling. And that would be really hard to be married to someone who's super controlling. So Casey and I were fighting or arguing about something. And he goes, there you go, being controlling. And I remembered what I learned. And I went, you know what? You're right. I am controlling. And I'll never forget his jaw, his face, like his whole expression was like, did my wife just say and admit she's actually controlling? Because I've been telling her she's controlling for years. And see, what happened was, this is how I started to change my perspective. See, because in my mind, when I first went to that session, he was the issue. But as I started focusing on myself, I realized, I'm part of the issue too in our marriage. It's not just him. And in fact, I actually started to see a lot of the things that Casey was saying about me were in fact true. And now I could either continue to blame Casey, which is what I was doing, or I could stop and actually say, I'm going to validate you. You've been telling me I'm controlling and you are right. And I am wrong. And that actually helped me change my perspective of my husband. Maybe he's not always wrong. Maybe he actually does have some self-awareness, spousal awareness. I mean, he's telling me I'm controlling. He's able to identify like he feels controlled by me. Now, did he do it in the healthiest way? No. But was he accurate? Absolutely. And so I'm going to just share with you that if you're listening to this and any of this resonates with you and you want to change your perspective of your spouse, the weirdest advice you're ever going to get from me, and I tell you, just trust the process, is actually stop focusing on your spouse. I know. It sounds weird. You can't control them. You have zero power, excuse me, over what they do, say, act. Literally, you have zero power. But you have 100% power and control over what you do. And you can actually learn ways to deal with someone who's controlling or loud or emotionally lazy or defensive or not a great communicator. Like you can actually model things and implement things in your relationship and impact them in a positive way. And that is my story. That is our story. And that is so many other people's stories in marriage. It starts with one person most of the time. Again, if it's you and your spouse on board together, I hope you are right now, like embrace each other, high five each other, like right now, like as you're watching this and say, we are not the norm, that we are all both in this. and wanting to succeed in our marriage. And we were both so fortunate that we're all in. For all the rest of us, the 80% of us, probably a little bit more than that, you know what? Don't be discouraged. Focus on yourself. And literally, you can learn so much. Now, if you're like, this sounds great, this is a message of hope, but this will change your perspective of your spouse. My heart softened towards my husband. I looked at him no longer as my enemy. I found attraction in him once again, and I was so not attracted to him, because who's attracted to an emotionally lazy person? Nobody. Or a defensive, prideful person? Nobody. Right? Can I see a show of hands? Is someone that's defensive attractive? No, never. Politicians, your mom, your husband, your wife, your kids, like it doesn't matter. It's like so not fun to be around someone who's defensive, right? But I think it's so important to know that if you are in a one-sided marriage, or if you're the one that's fighting for the marriage, which I'm going to assume you are because you're listening, you do have to have a plan. So you can't do this on your own. I wasn't able to do it on my own. I had to have someone teach me. Now, I understand that most of you can't afford therapy. And I understand that most of you don't have access to a great therapist, because there's, it's hard to find a good therapist. That's why we created our membership. Everything Casey and I have learned as individual spouses in our own therapy, I feel like all of our best friends are therapists, sex therapists. We invite them to come and do videos for us and challenges and worksheets. We pour into our membership, our app. It's on sale right now. It's $79 for the whole year. And that includes access for you and your spouse. You can pay $175 a week for therapy. Fantastic. Go for it. Do it. Just make sure you're getting results. But if you can't afford that, or your spouse won't go to therapy, or you're like, we don't have a therapist, we don't even know, or like, I don't like therapy, please use this. This is a completely different approach to marriage, by the way. Like, we're not a therapy replacement. I think for some people we are, and that's fine. But this is marriage coaching. It's very different. We're not just going to sit and talk about feelings, and that's not what always therapy does, but I know a lot of you have experienced that in therapy. That's like talk therapy. There's therapists that are actually good that will create action plans and next steps for you guys and teach you techniques, which is what you should be learning if you are going to therapy. But for those of you that are like, I need to fix me, I need to get healthy, there are things, I'm controlling, I'm an avoider, I threaten divorce, I give the silent treatment, I interrupt, I'm not a great mom anymore, this is affecting my parenting. You need to reach out and send us a DM. You need to, I will answer any of your questions. I'm working today, I'm working tomorrow, I'm working the next couple days. There is hope. Our membership can give you that hope. Our membership can give you the tools. So many of you ask, what's the 4-step apology? Sign up for membership and learn it. It will change your life, because the 4-step apology isn't just for marriage. It's for any relationship. If you're a parent, you need to be giving yourself giving 4-step apologies and teaching this to your children. But you have to take the first step. You have to be the one to say, I can sit here and say I'm too busy, because that's the excuse we hear the most is I'm too busy. I'm too busy. I don't have time. Great. If you don't have time, then we'll see you in divorce court in 3 years. I mean, the reality is that your marriage, you have to make time for your marriage. Now, if your spouse is unwilling, then use that time to grow, heal, learn how to be a kick-ass wife, an amazing husband. Why would you not do that? Makes me sad that people actually choose not to do that. So if you have time to spend scrolling on Instagram, or you binge shows, or I don't know, you listen to podcasts, all those things are great. But you have to make time to be a healthy spouse. You vowed, you promised on your wedding day that you were going to do that. So if you want information, comment below the number 2024, the year we're in, 2024, and you'll get the link for the sale. The sale ends this Tuesday night. What is that? The 9th? I think January 9th. I could be wrong. Is that the 10th? January 8th? January 8th? I don't even know the date. How sad. I think whatever this Tuesday is. Anyone in the comments, if you know the date of Tuesday, let me know. $79 for the whole year, and that's for you and your spouse. And if you're listening and you're like, how do I get my spouse to join me? Here's what you say. Make it about you. You say, I signed up for something called Marriage 365. I've been following their account on Instagram or Facebook, whatever. I'm realizing I'm not a great spouse. Like, there's a lot of areas that I need to work on. I need to improve in. Like, make it about you and how bad you are. Never say, you need this, you're the problem. The second you point fingers and say to your spouse, they're the problem, they're never going to participate. Okay, this is, by the way, this approach works for anything you want them to do, not just Marriage 365. If you want them to do therapy, it's the same thing. But you say, I want to get healthy for me. And now I get access with you. I'm going to invite you via email, babe. If you want to participate, great. If not, I totally get it. But I'm so sorry. Like, I have not been a great spouse. And in 2024, I got to get healthier for me. Most of the time, spouses will be like, well, okay, great. They're going to feel good because they're like, wow, she or he is admitting that they're the problem. Now, don't you worry. Once you become a member, we guide you and teach you and show you how to get your spouse to engage in membership. And if you're currently a member and you want your spouse to engage with you, make sure to save to your watch list 8 ways, the video is called 8 Ways to Get Your Spouse to Engage in Membership. I know, it's a really fancy title. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Brave Homeschooling says, I'm loving membership. We just had our marriage meeting for the week. Yes, the weekly marriage business meeting is what we're known for. People have stolen our idea now. It's fine. We don't even care. But we are the original creators of the weekly marriage business meeting. It came out 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we created that worksheet and that whole idea. I mean, maybe people were using it and doing it, but there was nothing online at that point. Thank you. Tuesday is the 9th. Thank you, Mama Steps. So $79. You guys, we promise to make it affordable because we know, again, most people can't afford the amount of therapy they need. Now, here's my little caveat. I'm going to do a Q&A in a minute. If you have any questions about membership, about Marriage 365, just send us a DM. We are happy to, we genuinely care. And a lot of you will hear our voice and you're like, oh, it's actually like Megan. It's actually Casey. It's like a real person. We genuinely care about your marriage. It's not just, hey, sign up and whatever. Like, we want you to succeed in your marriage. We want you to succeed in your life. So if you've got questions, hesitations, if you're like, hey, I really want to join, but do you have this topic? You reach out and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thanks, everyone.